Origin Unexplained.
Tonight we're going to delve into real oddities of history, stories that blur the line between fact and legend, leaving behind records that nobody's ever been able to fully explain. I'm Sue and this is Origin Unexplained, and let's get on with the show. It began in July of 1518 in the city of Strasbourg. Back then, Strasbourg was part of the Holy Roman Empire. A woman named Frau Trophea stepped into the streets and began to dance. There was no music and no celebration, just an uncontrollable compulsion. Within days, dozens had joined her. They couldn't stop. Their feet bled, their bodies collapsed, and still the dancing continued. At its height, hundreds were caught in the frenzy. Some died where they fell. The records still preserved in Strasbourg say dozens lost their lives due to exhaustion, strokes, or heart failure. Doctors actually call it dancing mania. Priests said it was punishment, but no one has ever been able to truly explain why it happened. Now, this has happened before with other places, but that was prior to the 1500s, but isn't that bizarre? From there, we moved to 12th century England in a little village called Woolpit. Villagers working in the fields found two children wandering near the wolf pits, a girl and a boy. However, their skin was green. I'm sure probably a lot of you have heard the story, but yes, their clothes were unlike anything anyone had ever seen, and they spoke in a language that didn't exist. And at first, the children actually refused to eat all food, but they did like raw beans. That could possibly be why they were green. Green beans. Eventually, they learned to eat normal food, and the green color faded. But tragedy struck the boy. He grew ill and passed away. Now, some say, the legend says that the boy, well, I don't know if you want to call it a legend. I think there is documentation for this. The boy actually started getting ill from eating regular food. How true that is, I'm not sure, but I just thought I would put that out there. Now, the girl survived. She was baptized. She learned English, and in time she married a man from King's Lynn. She actually told her new community that she and her brother had come from a twilight land where the sun had never shone and everyone was green. Her descendants carried her bloodline in England for generations, and her story still rests in the chronicles of that time. Very peculiar, very bizarre, but yeah, that's supposedly a true story. So now we're going to jump ahead to the 1950s in Hexham, England. This story was actually on an episode of In Search Of. I remember watching that as a kid. All right, so let's get going with this story. The Pollock family lost their two daughters. Their names were Joanna and Jacqueline, and they had been in like a tragic car accident. A year later, their mother gave birth to twin girls, Jennifer and Jillian. But from the beginning, the twins displayed knowledge they shouldn't have had. Jennifer even had the same birthmarks that Jacqueline once bore. So the twins recognized their sister's toys. They even called the dolls by names. And they had never seen them before. They had gone up to their mother and asked for the dolls. And they named off what they named their dolls. And she, was devastated. They pointed out places that were connected to Joanna and Jacqueline. They knew details that no child their age should have known. And as they grew older, those memories kind of faded, but the case still stands as one of the most famous examples of reincarnation. Two children living on with the lives of those who came before them. So here's one about Ong's Hat. It's kind of a nearly forgotten ghost town in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. So by the 1980s, rumors spread that rogue scientists had set up a hidden lab there, and their claim was that they had built a device called the egg, quote unquote. I guess it was capable of shifting consciousness into another dimension. So one of the men volunteered to try it. So what he described when he came back is still chilling. He said it felt like folding inside out of his body, dissolving into nothing. And then he was standing barefoot in warm grass beneath a violet sky. The light wasn't from a sun overhead. It was as if the sky itself glowed. So around him were towering silver trees with leaves that shimmered like blue-green, like dragonfly wings do. There were no people, no animals, and so on, but there were paths in the grass and in the stones, stacked in deliberate patterns and domes of smooth, bone-colored material that looked grown rather than built. Very interesting. He swore he wasn't alone. He felt watched every moment he was there, like the place already knew him. When he returned, his watch was 3 days behind. But to the team outside, he'd only been gone 20 minutes. Now, I was always fascinated by this next story. All right, and it's the case of the man from Torrid. In July of 1954 at Tokyo's Haneda Airport, customs agents had stopped a traveler with a passport from a country that didn't exist. It looked real, I guess, but it was stamped with dozens of authentic-looking visas. But the country's name was Torrid. The man insisted his homeland had existed for centuries, pointing to Andorra on a map and claiming that that was where his country had always been. So customs, I guess, had detained him overnight in a guarded hotel room while they investigated this. But by morning, the man was gone. He'd vanished. His documents disappeared with him, and no trace was ever found. And they did have people outside of his room, so he did not get up and just walk out, and he did not jump out the window either. So here's another story. On a hot afternoon in 1880, outside of Gallatin, Tennessee, David Lang was walking across his pasture toward his horses. His wife Emma watched from the porch, and their children played nearby. A lawyer friend had arrived in a buggy on the road, and actually several witnesses saw him take a few steps across open ground and then vanish mid-stride. So 1 second he was there, and the next nothing. No sound, no movement, and no hole in the ground. Now, the family and the neighbors had searched for days, and they even used lanterns, and they were digging, and they've used probing rods and everything else, but nothing ever showed up. The only sign was a dark circle of dead grass where he had apparently disappeared. Now, that spot apparently never grew back, no matter how often it was seeded. Months later, Emma claimed that she had heard her husband's voice calling faintly from like some patch of the ground there where it was burnt, as though it were like rising up from beneath the earth. And the children, they said that they even heard it too, and more than once, kind of like a whisper being dragged further and further away. The family eventually left the farm, but locals whispered about it for years, and some say that if you stand in the field at dusk, the air still feels wrong, as though the land is holding on to something it refuses to give back. In 1901, 2 English women, Charlotte Ann Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain, had traveled to Paris for the exposition. Now, they were respectable, educated women, not the kind who chase ghost stories, but what they experienced would become one of the strangest mysteries ever recorded. They claimed they had booked a room in a small, charming hotel just off Rue de Relucheux, and the place had an old-world feel. Oil lamps on the walls, heavy antique furniture, and the staff were dressed in a way that already seemed dated for the time. So they had spent the night without incident, and they checked out and planned to return. But when they went back the next day, the hotel was gone. Not closed, not under renovation, it was just gone. The street itself looked different. Now, the buildings around it were different, and the locals swore no such hotel had ever existed there. The women searched for weeks, but were convinced they had mistaken the location, but nothing matched what they had seen. Stranger still, they began to recall details that didn't add up. So the night clerk had spoken in an oddly archaic French, and then the guests in the lobbies wore clothing styles like a century out of date. Slowly, they came to believe they hadn't simply lost their way. They believed they had slipped into another time, a fragment of the past, and just as suddenly slipped back out of it. Years later, they actually published their story under pseudonyms in a book called Adventure, standing by it until their deaths, and to this day, no one has ever proven what really happened. It's a real popular story that's gone around over the years as well. So this next story, it started in the summer of 1944 in the quiet town of Mattoon in Illinois. People began reporting a strange sweet smell in their homes, followed by sudden paralysis, nausea, and breathing trouble. Now, victims said that they couldn't move their legs and that their mouths felt frozen, and every time it was the same thing. The smell would hit first, and then came the symptoms. Some even said that they had saw a figure slipping away into the night. The newspapers called him the Mad Gasser. Panic swept through Mattoon, and the doors obviously were locked, and families took turns staying awake at night. Now, one woman claimed that she saw a man dressed in dark clothing crouched beneath her bedroom window. Others said they heard someone pumping a kind of spray or gas, but no one could ever catch him. So police investigated dozens of reports, and they found nothing. No prints, no residue, no suspects, nothing. Some thought it was mass hysteria brought on by the wartime stress. Well, others believed it was a real person using some sort of homemade anesthetic gas. The attacks stopped just as suddenly as they had begun, and here's the kicker. This wasn't the first time. Similar reports came out of Virginia back in the 1930s. Same symptoms, same gas, same vanishings. And to this day, no one knows who the Mad Gasser was or what he used or why he targeted those homes, but for 2 terrifying weeks, a whole town lived in fear of something that they couldn't see and could not catch. Down in southeastern Massachusetts, there is a place locals call the Bridgewater Triangle. It's 200 square miles of pure weird. It's a stretch of land where the stories pile up on each other so thick that people don't even try to separate fact from legend anymore. So inside this triangle, you'll hear about UFOs darting through the night sky, poltergeists slamming doors in empty houses, giant phantom birds with wings that block out the stars, and people who swear they've seen Bigfoot wandering the swamps. But this is really neat. The strangest tales come from the roads themselves. So drivers actually say that whole stretches of highway just disappear beneath them. One moment they're on familiar pavement, headlights bouncing off painted lines, and then the world shifts. The road apparently dissolves. Some say it goes pitch black, others describe it as if the ground gives way to a void, and for seconds or minutes, they're driving on nothing. When the road reappears, they find themselves miles ahead, and so they were pushed forward in time. Now, people have pulled off shaking and swearing. They skipped whole sections of the drive with no explanation, obviously. And it doesn't end there. In the Freetown Fall River State Forest, right inside the triangle, hunters have stumbled on mutilated animals laid out in ritual patterns. There's rumors of cults, sacrifices, of something feeding on the energy of that land. Police have investigated murders there, bodies left in shallow graves, and even tell you the forest feels wrong. Now, hikers report glowing orbs weaving through the trees, whispers that follow them along the trail, and figures that vanish when confronted. And why wouldn't they if they've been murdered, right? The Wampanoag tribe warned long ago that the land was poisoned with bad energy ever since they were forced to sell it under pressure. So some say the curse runs through the soil itself, warping whatever touches it. The triangle doesn't give you just one mystery. It throws every kind of strangeness at you at once, as though the laws of nature bend differently inside its borders. And that's why it's one of the most haunted, most feared places in America. And if you find yourself driving through at night, you better hope the road stays where it's supposed to be. This was another podcast from Origin Unexplained. We will be doing another one soon. Make sure you stop back for more. And if you're not following us, if you're listening on YouTube, make sure that you follow and hit the bell notification so you know every time we go live. And if you want to tell a story yourself, or if you just want your own story told by one of us, email us at originunexplained, and that's UNX, no E, PLAINED, at gmail.com.
Origin Unexplained.